Should she be in prison for murder?
No, absolutely not.
Should she be in prison for aggravated vehicular homicide?
I don't even know about that aggravated part.
I don't know about the aggravated part because I don't think you can still say why was going on the car. Should she have been charged with reckless vehicular homicide, 2 counts?
I don't even.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not if it was medical.
She thought she could walk free. She thought no one would ever know the truth. But when that video played in court, the silence in the room said it all. 2 young men gone, their futures stolen in an instant, and a teenager now facing the weight of the choices she made. Stories like this aren't just tragic headlines, they're warnings. They show us how quickly one reckless choice, one moment of anger, or one act of selfishness can destroy countless lives forever. If you believe in standing for justice, in giving victims a voice, and in learning from these tragedies so it doesn't happen to others, hit that subscribe button now. Here, we don't just watch true crime, we build a community that fights for the truth, supports victims, and holds those responsible accountable. Together, we can make sure stories like this aren't forgotten, and that the lessons they leave behind protect others from the same fate. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan, 2 young men with their whole lives ahead of them, each with dreams, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow. Dominic was 20, street smart, quick to crack a joke, the kind of friend who would stand by your side when no one else would. His mother described him as the light of their home, someone who brought energy into every room he entered. Davion was 19, quiet but warm, a peacemaker among friends, and a son who made his family proud. He wasn't part of the drama that swirled around that summer. He was just a friend in the wrong place, at the worst possible time. That night, neither of them could have known it would be their last. They ended up in Mackenzie's car, just another late-night ride through the quiet streets of Strongsville, Ohio. Maybe it felt like a normal summer night, music in the background, the streetlights glowing, windows down, cool air rushing in. They trusted the driver beside them, a girl they knew, a girl who smiled in selfies and posted dance videos on TikTok, a girl they believed was just another teenager like them, navigating life, love, and the chaos of growing up. They didn't know what was coming. They didn't know this drive would end with 2 families forever broken, with funeral flowers instead of graduation photos, with a mother answering the door to officers who came with news no parent should ever hear. Dominic and Davion weren't supposed to die that night, but a choice was made behind that wheel, and it turned a normal summer morning into a nightmare that still echoes through every life they touched. It was just before dawn on July 31st, 2022, when Mackenzie Shirilla turned onto a deserted industrial road in Strongsville, Ohio. She circled back, pressing the gas, the car picking up speed, 40, 60, 80, 100 miles per hour. In the passenger seat, Dominic. In the back, Davion. Maybe they felt the rush of adrenaline. Maybe they didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The car slammed into a brick warehouse wall at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. The Toyota crumpled like paper, glass shattering, metal folding, the silence of the street replaced with sirens and screams. Firefighters rushed to the scene, but it was already too late. Dominic and Davion were gone, pronounced dead where they sat, in a car they thought would take them home. Mackenzie survived, and with her survival came questions that wouldn't go away. At first, it looked like another tragic teen accident, a young driver losing control, a late-night drive gone horribly wrong. But as investigators looked closer, the story didn't add up. There were no skid marks on the road, no sign of braking, no last-second swerve to avoid a crash. When they pulled the car's black box data, the truth became harder to ignore. Mackenzie had floored the gas pedal, reaching 100 miles per hour, and she never touched the brakes. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of panic. It was deliberate. But the biggest question remained, why? To understand why this crash happened, investigators turned to Mackenzie and Dominic's relationship. On social media, they looked like any teenage couple, posing for selfies, laughing in videos, sharing moments that made it seem like they had it all figured out. But behind those filtered photos was a different story. Friends said their relationship was explosive. Arguments that started small would spiral into screaming matches, breakups followed by makeup texts, accusations of cheating, threats of leaving, threats of hurting each other. Mackenzie, who once seemed bubbly and carefree online, was now described as possessive and quick to anger. Dominic, street smart and social, was often caught between wanting to leave and feeling trapped. In the weeks before the crash, their fights grew more intense. Mackenzie would send messages threatening to harm herself if Dominic left. Other times, she threatened to harm him. One friend later testified that Mackenzie once said she would crash the car to end it all. At the time, it was brushed off as teenage drama, just words said in anger. But now, those words felt like a warning that no one saw coming. And soon, investigators would find something that proved those threats weren't just talk, they were a promise of what was to come. 06:30, the chilling test run. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something that changed everything. Just days before the deadly crash, Mackenzie was caught on surveillance cameras driving along that same industrial road, the same quiet stretch, the same path. She circled the area, driving slowly, almost as if studying the route, checking the turns, watching the road. Investigators would later call it a trial run, a chilling rehearsal for what would happen days later, at 100 miles per hour, with Dominic and Davion in the car. This wasn't a random act of reckless teenage driving. This wasn't a mistake. It was starting to look like a plan. But nothing would hit harder than the moment the families were told the truth about what happened that morning. It was the moment every parent fears. Police arrived at the home of Dominic Russo's mother, Christine. She opened the door to see the look on the officers' faces, and she knew something was terribly wrong. The officers asked when she last saw Dominic. She tried to stay calm, but her voice shook as she answered, "Last night." Then came the words that broke her world apart. Dominic was gone. Her knees buckled. She collapsed, screaming, her cries echoing through the neighborhood as the weight of the news sank in. "Why him? What happened?" she cried, desperate for answers, begging for it all to be a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. Dominic and Davion were gone, and Mackenzie, the girl they trusted, was alive and in police custody. In that moment, two families' lives changed forever, and the search for answers was only just beginning. As firefighters pulled Mackenzie from the wreckage, she was alive, bruised, shaken, but alive. She was taken to the hospital, treated for non-life-threatening injuries, and soon after, she was placed under arrest. At first, it didn't make sense to some. Why was the driver, a teenage girl, being arrested when she had just survived a horrific crash? Wasn't this just a tragic accident? But the evidence was stacking up, and detectives were watching Mackenzie closely. In the back of the police cruiser, her behavior was strange. One moment, she sat silently, staring out the window, expressionless, almost cold. The next, she would burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably before wiping her face and returning to silence. It was a ride filled with contradictions, much like the case itself. She didn't know it then, but her life was about to be split in two, before the crash and after, because soon, Mackenzie would be facing the evidence that would decide her fate. In August 2023, Mackenzie Shirilla stood trial, facing multiple charges, including murder. It wasn't a jury trial. One judge, Nancy Margaret Russo, would decide her fate. Prosecutors argued that Mackenzie had used her car as a weapon, turning it into a 3,500-pound missile aimed at a brick wall with Dominic and Davion inside. They laid out a case of intent, planning, and a motive rooted in a toxic, spiraling relationship. The defense painted a different picture. They claimed Mackenzie was a grieving teen who made a terrible mistake, that she suffered memory loss from brain trauma, and that she couldn't remember anything from that night. They suggested it was sudden acceleration, a panic, a tragic accident that had gone horribly wrong. It almost seemed convincing. A young girl, a moment of recklessness, a future destroyed by one bad choice. But the prosecution wasn't done. They had one piece of evidence that would change everything: the video. In court, the prosecution revealed the evidence that would silence the room. First, the threats. Friends testified that Mackenzie had said she would crash the car if Dominic tried to leave her. Words once dismissed as teenage drama now felt like a chilling prophecy. Then, the surveillance footage. Days before the crash, Mackenzie was seen driving the same industrial road, slowly, carefully, mapping out the route. Prosecutors called it a test run. But the final blow came from the black box data pulled from her car. It showed Mackenzie accelerating to 100 miles per hour and never touching the brakes. No swerving, no hesitation. Just a straight, full-speed impact into a brick wall. The courtroom fell silent as the evidence played. All the claims of memory loss, panic, or accident fell apart. The truth was clear. This wasn't reckless driving. This wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. And soon, the judge would deliver the verdict that would change Mackenzie's life forever. On August 14, 2023, the courtroom held its breath as Judge Nancy Margaret Russo delivered the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The judge declared that Mackenzie Shirilla had acted with purpose and intent, accelerating into that wall with the mission to end two lives. There was no mechanical failure, no medical emergency, no panic, just a deliberate act that turned a car into a weapon. As the words sank in, Mackenzie's composure cracked. The confidence she once carried in court was gone. She began to sob uncontrollably, her tears echoing in the silent courtroom. The reality hit her all at once. She wasn't going home. At just 19 years old, Mackenzie Shirilla was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. For the families of Dominic and Davion, the sentence was justice, but it could never bring back the futures that were stolen that morning. And for Mackenzie, it was the moment she realized that the choices she made would follow her for the rest of her life. As the sentence was read, Mackenzie Shirilla's world shattered. Gone was the confident teenager who once believed she would walk free. In her place was a 19-year-old sobbing in court, realizing she would not be going home. She had leaned heavily on the hope that this would be seen as a mistake, that somehow the court would believe her claims of memory loss and panic. But the evidence had spoken louder than her tears. In that moment, the weight of her choices crashed down on her, the reality of prison, the reality that Dominic and Davion were gone forever because of what she did. And for the families, the grief remained. Dominic's mother said, "She was part of our family, we loved her, and yet she's the reason my son is gone." Davion's family shared the same heartbreak, knowing he was just a friend in the wrong place at the wrong time, paying the ultimate price. There were no winners in this case, only lives lost, futures destroyed, and a community left asking how it could have been prevented. As the verdict spread, the community was split. Some saw Mackenzie Shirilla as a manipulative teenager who played the victim, using tears in court to cover the truth of what she had done. They believed she planned the crash, that she turned her car into a weapon, and that justice had been served. Others saw her as a broken young woman whose life spiraled out of control, who made a terrible mistake in a toxic relationship, and who would now spend the rest of her life paying for it. Social media debates flared, with people arguing about intent, mental health, and accountability. Was this murder, or was it a tragic accident fueled by unchecked emotions? But while the world argued, the families of Dominic and Davion faced a reality no sentence could fix. Empty bedrooms, silence where there was once laughter, birthdays and holidays marked by absence. The community was left with a lesson. Reckless choices and unchecked emotions can destroy lives in an instant. And as Mackenzie sat in her cell, the consequences of that one decision became her new reality. Day after day, year after year, even now, people still ask, was this a carefully planned act, or a tragic moment of teenage recklessness? The evidence pointed to intent, her threats, the test run days before, the black box data showing no brakes at 100 miles per hour. The judge saw it as clear and deliberate. But others look at Mackenzie Shirilla and see a teenager lost in a toxic relationship, overwhelmed by emotion, unable to see past the chaos she felt in those final moments. A young mind making a permanent decision in a moment of temporary anger. It's a question that leaves people divided, but one truth remains. Dominic and Davion are gone. Two families are forever changed. And a community was forced to confront how quickly lives can be destroyed when anger, pain, and impulse go unchecked. This wasn't just a crash. It was a choice with consequences that can never be undone. You've seen the evidence. You've heard the stories. Now we want to hear from you. Was this a tragic accident fueled by teenage emotions? Or was it a calculated plan that ended two young lives? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice helps keep these stories alive and reminds the world that victims like Dominic and Davion will not be forgotten. If you believe in standing for justice, in giving victims a voice, and in learning from tragedies so it doesn't happen to others, hit that subscribe button now. Here, we don't just watch true crime. We build a community that fights for truth, supports victims, and holds those responsible accountable. Together we can make a difference, one story at a time. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next video.